Hello, everybody. I just want to say hello. So, and hello.
Yes.
Nice
hello.
to see you.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
I think actually we could start with a book of photographs. I did buy this book, now I got the cover at home, by Judy Lynn, who's done a book of photographs of Patti from late 60s, early 70s. And I think we got one of those photographs here.
Yes, my room.
Do you think we could start, and you could tell us a little bit about this room and this photograph?
Yes, well, that was taken in 1970, and I will say that my present room and my hotel room looks about the same. I seem to take my mess wherever I go. But I lived in a loft with Robert Mapplethorpe, and this was my half of the loft. And my whole life, even now, I do everything in the same space. I sleep and I work and draw and take photographs. Everything is in one space. And everything reflects my, my inner world as well as my outer world, my aesthetics, the things that I like, and also my very chaotic mind. Is this sound too loud? Okay, okay.
You write about that particular apartment in Just Kids. You write about a lot about apartments, but that one on, I think it's on 23rd Street, seemed to be very important, that period. What was your life like in 1970? Have you ever thought of performing yet then?
No, in 1970, one reason it was so important, it was the first time in my life that I had a room of my own. I was raised with, there were 4 siblings in a very tiny house, and I never had my own room. And then I lived with Robert, and this was the first time that I had my own space and could make it exactly as I wished. And I was working in a bookstore, I was supporting Robert, and I really didn't think of performing at all. I was focused on writing poetry, I was reading Mayakovsky, I was, writing. Sometimes I would be in an underground play or something, but my focus was really to draw and paint and writing poetry.
This is a living space, but you could also see it as a creative space, which is very important to have. Isn't it important to still keep that sort of living space or creating space, but keep it in your head, a place where you can create?
Yes, absolutely. I take, Virginia Woolf speaks of having the importance of having a room of one's own, but it's also good to have a room of one's own in the mind. I have found, no matter what my situation, that my inner world, that I, always keep in touch with it, because in our shifting life, we have to stay in touch with our, creative aspect. In 1979, I moved to Detroit. I married and had children, and much of my time was taken in raising my children and making meals, scrubbing the floors, doing my domestic tasks. But I always nurtured my inner room, and so my creative source went with me wherever I would go.
How do you sort of keep that in the room and protect it from intruders?
I have a huge mastiff, a big dog that keeps everybody out. No, I've been doing it as a child. I was always, as a child, I was always an outsider. I had a happy childhood, but I was always a bit on the outside. Lived in my own world, a world of books and imagination. And so I have been nurturing it and living within it all my life. It is a very familiar space, and I have no need to guard it because it's who I am. It's not going to dissipate. And no matter what sacrifices I've had in my life, that space, that creative space that also is connected with the soul and the heart and the mind has remained intact.
I guess whatever you work with, but maybe especially in the recording industry, you may have that room intact when you start, but then people start knocking on that room and rearranging the furniture and everything.
No. It's impossible. First of all, I think that my room is so I have developed it so much through the years that it would be impossible to decipher. I have no fear. It's where my work comes from, and I offer my work to people. There's no reason for them to invade my celestial space or my inner celestial space. I think that an artist gives as much as one can give, and we always have to save a little for ourselves, not in a selfish way, but so that we can constantly rejuvenate or have something new to give. And, also I do so many things that there are so many rooms. There's little compartments in my room. I have the photography room and the writing room and the painting room and the room that tends to my children. And it's a labyrinth of rooms.
You talk now about a lot of your influences, and I think one of the many great things about Just Kids, your book that I presume quite a lot of people have read, is that you're so open with your influences all the time.
Well, I think it's important. I share my influences so that other people can find them. I'm happy to tell people who has inspired me and who has influenced me, so they too can experience these people. When I take photographs, I photograph things that I can share with others who perhaps will not go to the places that I go to or see the things that I've seen. But I think that it's one of the most beautiful things in life, what man gives to each other. The great books and paintings and songs and so many. It's like nature. We go out and nature gives us the clouds and mountains and rivers and wildflowers. And man, our fellow man, we give, our ideas. We give poems and drawings and paintings and music, whether it's Wagner or, a pop song that makes everybody happy.
You seem also to almost say that it's okay being starstruck. People get embarrassed by being starstruck, but you seem to be, it's quite a good thing to be a starstruck.
Oh, I'm starstruck all the time.
Yeah.
I'm so excited because tomorrow at the ceremony I will meet Henric Hemmerlind, who's one of my favorite contemporary writers. I'm thrilled that I'm going to meet him. It's one of the things I'm really looking forward to. I can't believe that I'm going to meet him after reading all of his books, and so it's a happy part of life. I was in a hotel in London, and I got in the elevator, and one of my favorite actresses also got on the elevator, and we were looking at each other, both starstruck. And it was like I was saying, "You're so great," and she was saying, "No, you're so great," and I was saying, "No, you're so great." It's fun, there's nothing wrong with it, and I know my own worth. I'm proud of the work that I do, and I have a sense of myself, but I'm always excited and happy to see what people do. The new generation, as well as people I've admired through the decades.
I think one of the reasons you were so inspiring to men when you started out, you weren't really a musician, you were more like a performer.
I'm still not a musician.
No, okay.
Well, I really I entered rock and roll in such a strange way, sort of politically in a way, because my first ambition was to infuse blood and new life in poetry, because I went to many poetry readings and they seemed extremely boring, and I wanted poetry to be more alive. And I invited Lenny Kaye to give me some sonic landscapes to read my poetry over. And, you know, in time we developed, he would play 3 chords, he and my pianist Richard Soul, and I would go from a poem to fusing it with Gloria or fusing it with some other rock and roll song. And it all happened organically. But the initial reason was to make poetry more exciting. And then I felt that rock and roll was getting, you know, over glamorous, over corporate. And then my ambition was to bring rock and roll back to its roots, to the people. But I never came into, as you said, into rock and roll as a musician. I did come as a performer, and I really haven't improved any. But I think I am a natural performer and communicator, so I'm still here. So.
I know you played in Ireland in the sort of mid-late 70s, and I think a young drummer came up to you and asked for advice, what to do with his life.
Well, they wouldn't let rock and roll go into certain areas of Ireland in the 70s. I wasn't allowed to bring my band. So my late pianist and I went by ourselves, and we went to Dublin and went to a church that a priest arranged to have young people who were having difficulties, some wayward, some very poor, and give them a place to talk. And Richard and I visited, and we performed for them and talked to them. And one young boy, a very beautiful young boy, said that he wished that he could have a band, but he didn't think that would happen. And I said, of course you can have a band. You know, rock and roll belongs to the people. You have the right to enter the arena of rock and roll as much as anyone. And I was a poor kid from New Jersey. I did it. You can do it. And that boy turned out to be the drummer of U2. So, and every time I see Larry, we always speak of those early days, and he did it because he had the enthusiasm, the vision, and the desire, and rock and roll does belong to the people, and he proved it.
I was thinking, on your first album, Horses, 1975, a lot of those lyrics had been along for a very long time. They had been poems first. If you take, for example, the first track on Horses, when did you first write those lyrics?
Well, Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine. I wrote when I was 20, probably in 1967. And I wrote it as a philosophical statement, and not in opposition to Jesus, because I think Jesus was a great revolutionary and a great master, but I still felt that I wanted to take responsibility for my own actions. And it was more of a declaration of existence than something against Jesus Christ. But I wrote it when I was quite young, and it evolved. I would read it as a poem, and it just happened organically. Lenny and Richard and I were in our practice room, and I asked them to play a simple chord structure under it, and it was like A, D, E or something very, I don't know, it's 3 chords. And I liked the rhythm very much, and I said, well, is there a song that has those chords? And Lenny said, about 1,000 of them. And I said, well, like what? And he said, well, like Gloria. And then I thought, Jesus died for somebody's sins, but not mine. Gloria. It seemed very, heralding. And so I said, well, we'll try that. And it just happened organically. And it started with just the 3 of us. We had no drummer or bass player, and we began to perform it in that manner. All the things that are on horses happened organically. Redondo Beach I wrote in 1970 as a poem for my sister. And, I had no thought of making a record or anything. I just wrote them as poems.
Redondo Beach is really sort of a reggae track in a way.
Yes.
I just came back from London 5 days. I've been doing this story about sort of the London roots reggae scene, why the Jamaican influence is so important in London. And your name popped up a lot there. People said that you were very inspiring. It was like you, The Clash, and Johnny Rotten in a way who introduced a new generation of reggae.
When my band first came, The Clash and the Sex Pistols hadn't formed yet, but everyone was hanging out in the same area of London, listening to reggae music, the Rastafarian music, and this music was very, very important to Lenny and I. I had a very strong connection for various reasons, studying the Old Testament, studying the story of the Queen of Sheba, King David, which I liked very much, and of course the Rimbaud connection, because Rimbaud had gone to Abyssinia, and our record Radio Ethiopia was dedicated to the Ethiopian people in the time of famine, and that was in 1976. So we had a very strong pre-connection, and it was such a wonderful scene in London at that time with the very young pre-punk rockers and the Rastafarian community and some American invaders like me and Lenny Kaye.
Yeah. For people who might not know the origin of roots reggae, like Ethiopia is like a sacred country with Haile Selassie, and the colors is the Ethiopian flag, right?
Well, yes, I mean,
yeah.
When I saw Bob Marley perform in '78, and he was one of the greatest performers I ever saw, he performed in front of a huge Ethiopian flag because they had the same roots in a certain way as I did, but they developed it as a philosophy and a religion. It was nice because I met all of these people, including Bob Marley, and the scriptures were very important to them, and I've studied the Bible since I was a child, the stories of the Queen of Sheba, and then, of course, they revered Haile Selassie and the history of Ethiopia, which I knew about from studying Arthur Rimbaud. So we found ways of connecting not only through music, which would have been enough, but through philosophy and history.
And that the cross you're wearing?
Yes, it is.
Also
Yes, this is about 200 years old, and it is an Ethiopian cross. And I've always been very fascinated with Ethiopia, which, as I said, came from studying Solomon and Sheba and Rimbaud. And Arthur Rimbaud spent the last segment of his life in Ethiopia, so I have studied quite a bit about it. But then also in '76, I was very, very concerned because they had a terrible famine there, and no one seemed to even know about it. No one seemed concerned about it. And that's why we put out the record Radio Ethiopia.
When you talk about sort of in other areas combining poetry and music, you quite often end up with something very sort of mellow and pretentious. But I think unique thing with you that you combine poetry with like the spirit of early rock and roll. Early rock and roll and soul music seem to be very important to you, that sort of energy.
Well, I was raised on R&B music. I'll be 65 in December, so I have seen in my lifetime the whole evolution of rock and roll. Because when I was a child, Little Richard and Elvis Presley and Bo Diddley, they were all inventing rock and roll, and then I saw it evolve in my lifetime. And certainly early R&B, rhythm and blues music was very important to me. I grew up on it, I danced to it, and it's part of my rhythm. And as well as something like John Coltrane, as well as music that is both sensual and rhythmic, but also spiritual. And those are part of my roots. I'm not a technical. A lot of fusion in music is very technical, and I'm not technical. I'm intuitive, and I understand spiritually and intuitively the voyage of someone like John Coltrane, and I can move in that manner, but not technically. And I think that's good, though, because we're not caught up in the mathematics of music.
I think you write about the funeral of John Coltrane in Just Kids, right?
Yes.
And also, I think in the same page you mention a Swedish movie, Bo Widerberg, Elvira Madigan.
Yes.
Which was very surprising for coming from Sweden that you even had seen that movie.
Oh, it was one of the most beautiful movies ever made. And of course I would see it.
Okay.
It's I've seen it many times.
Yeah.
And well, when I grew up, Bergman was very, very important in the early 60s to discover. I lived in a rural area of South Jersey, but I would go to Philadelphia, which was the closest big city, and they would have movie houses that would show foreign movies. You could watch them all day for nothing, for 25 cents, because nobody cared about them. And I would sit all day watching, Wild Strawberries or Through a Glass Darkly, all of these movies over and over, as well as Fellini and, all kinds of the French New Wave, because more commercial movie houses didn't show them. So I had a very good education. But Elvira Madigan was a very special movie. It was like a poem, and I've never forgotten it. It's just... it's in my room. It's screened in my room quite a bit.
In this book of photographs, you write an introduction to it where you and the photographer Judy Lynn almost were pretending to be in a movie all the time.
Yes.
Even you, none of you were famous. You just had no one knew about you, but you pretended this is a movie.
I love the movies. We both love Bresson. Just because aesthetically, these movies were like moving photographs. I mean, you look at Carl Dreyer's Joan of Arc, or you look, they were so different from contemporary American movies. They were like moving photographs. And, we loved to pretend we were in our own movie and make our own movie stills. It was part of the joy of life, of being young.
Yeah. Do you think that to be able to create art, you have to sort of become an artist first?
Well, I think that no. I think there's two aspects of creation. One is, as William Blake speaks of, we all possess the creative impulse, and all of us, have the right to express ourselves. It's why so many teenage girls write poems, or everyone expresses themselves. The amateur, or now in our culture, on the internet, thousands and thousands of people writing their own songs, putting out their own CDs, taking their own photographs. The creative impulse in our present culture is universally explored. And I think that's a good thing, and I think it's important. But I also believe that there are special instances where people have a true calling. It's another level. It's just as everyone can cook, but certain people are blessed and become great chefs, and they cook in a mystical way. Or we can all grow something, but certain people create gardens that are like paradise. And I believe in the special calling. So I think there is the universal aspect where all man creates, but there is another level where certain people are called to nourish the people. And then you have our great poets. You have Raphael, or you have Shakespeare, or you have, our most gifted people that have given Brancusi, whoever these people are. And I think that's there. So there is the democratization of the creative impulse, but also the higher calling. And I believe in both.
And when you started performing, you tried to sort of break down the barrier between performer and the audience, didn't you, in a way?
Well, yes, because I think that rock and roll is very special as a genre. And I think it's it's one of the few wonderful things that America has given to the world, because I think that it is a uniquely American genre that was, of course, magnified by the rest of the world. But it has that, the arrogance and the revolutionary aspects and the youth of America. But also, rock and roll is the great equalizer.
Yeah.
Really, there are people who are special, like Jim Morrison or Jimi Hendrix or whoever might be special, your own countrymen. There are many people who have done special things. But in the end, it's the people's art. It's the people's genre. Anyone really can perform rock and roll. If you have something to say, if you have energy, it precludes no one. Everyone is welcome. And I got on the stage. I was nobody. I was a girl from South Jersey. I came from a poor family. I had no musical abilities to speak of, no technical abilities. I was working in a bookstore, but I had a vision, and I just went and did it. And I always felt if I could do it, anybody could do it. And I wanted that always to be part of what I did. I didn't want people to look at me like I was someone special because I performed rock and roll. I don't think that, I mean, hopefully I have special qualities, but performing is natural to me, and I wanted to blur that area as much as possible because, in terms of rock and roll, I'm one of the people too, so.
Yeah. Just one last question. What's the next chapter? What are you going to do? I think you're both working on a new book and a new album.
I just finished recording my new album. I'm very excited about it. So I've just finished that. We have to mix it, and it'll probably come out next year. I finished it the day before I came here.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I was in the studio the last night, and with my my son and daughter and my band, and we worked on our last song, and I'm working on 2 books, and that will take a while. And one is sort of a companion to Just Kids, which is more focused on music, and the other is a detective story. So.
Oh, really? Fantastic. Okay, thank you. Been a pleasure talking. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And we actually have a little time for questions in the audience. So if anyone wants to ask a question, yes.
I saw that you're going to make a concert on the 9/11, a free concert in New York. I'm wondering if you could just say what is 9/11 to you.
Well, she has asked, she has spoken about a concert I am doing. That was not true. I am not doing a concert for 9/11. They just wrote that. I don't think that 9/11 is anything to celebrate. So I'm not doing it. So that's false information. I am doing a concert, but it's a free concert for French radio, which is part of a tour I'm doing. But my feelings about September 11th, when I think of September 11th, I think of 2 things. September 10th and who we were September 10th and what our world was like, which was vastly different than now. And when I think of September 11th, I don't just think of the World Trade Center, which I saw collapse. I don't just think of the people who died. I think of the thousands and thousands and thousands of Iraqi citizens who we have killed, the infrastructure of the country that we destroyed. I think of of Guantanamo Bay. I think of all the painful and negative things that happened in retaliation to this tragedy. And I mourn the fact that we didn't work harder on communication. And so, you know, my feelings about this September 11th are not nationalistic. I feel very saddened and ashamed about how our government retaliated. And I think it's important that we all think about not only the loss of life on September 11th, but all of the things that have happened since. And we have to watch our governments and make certain that our governments don't use any particular tragedy in order to keep an eye on us and take away from our personal freedom.
Hi, Patti.
Hello.
Hi. I would like to ask you about your relationship to God, your view on God.
Do you want to talk to him? We're very close. Well, I have had a relationship with God, or what I call God or imagine God, since I was a child. My mother gave me the concept of God, and I was very happy to embrace it because I thought it was very beautiful to imagine that there was some greater energy to aspire to and to talk to and be protected by. And as I've evolved, my concept of God has changed, but it is always with me. I can't explain it. I can just simply say that I have an open belief system. And my open belief system embraces other people's belief systems. For me, God is someone that I pray to, and perhaps I am praying to myself, or I am praying to an abstract energy, but it doesn't matter. And I think that, you know, I try to respect the essence of all people's beliefs and faiths. But to me, the most beautiful aspect of any religion is personal prayer, because personal prayer hurts no one. Personal prayer does not take away from anyone's space. Personal prayer does not isolate anyone. And so I base my relationship with God on prayer.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. Yes.
Oh, hi, Patti. I would like to make a couple of questions quick. One of your any favorite MC5 songs?
I have not performed any MC5 songs, no.
If you have any favorite song.
Pardon me?
If you have any favorite song from MC5.
My favorite thing about the MC5 was my husband, Fred Sonic Smith.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The second one, it's about your period as a rock journalist, music journalist. I think you were publishing at Cream magazine.
Well, I wasn't really a rock journalist. I did write pieces. I was not I was sort of a maverick journalist. I wrote pieces occasionally, but I always, when I wrote, tried to write in the spirit of Baudelaire, to open people's eyes, to find things that were wonderful, whether it was Albert Ayler or the young Allman Brothers or Jimi Hendrix, things that I liked. Lotte Lenya, I wrote about things that I liked, but it was just something that I did, sometimes simply to make a living. And I did it at a very exciting time in rock journalism. When I was young, people took it very seriously and wrote very beautiful philosophic pieces on rock and roll. And I think that journalists should re-embrace the possibilities. Think of the great critics like Apollinaire and Baudelaire, and really embrace journalism and be careful that it doesn't move into the realm of gossip.
I think we still have time.
Hello, how are you?
Hi.
I have three quick questions. Are you cooperating with Polly Jane Harvey? And who do you want to portray you in the film version of Just Kids? And finally, I've heard that your latest album is partly inspired by The Master and Margarita by Bulgakov. Could you please?
All right, I'll answer them quickly. I have never I've never collaborated with PJ Harvey, but I like her very much. I love her new album, has a great song on it called The Words That Maketh Murder. It's a fantastic song with a beautiful video. I like her very much. I have no idea who would portray me. Hopefully someone young, awkward, with a certain amount of bravado. Someone unknown. And yes, The Master and Margarita was one of the influences for our album, and including, I will give you a clue. There is a song about Pontius Pilate's dog. So that's all I can tell you.
I think I've actually got a last question.
Yes.
I forgot to ask you.
Yes.
Who do you think should be awarded the Polar Music Prize next year?
Oh, I would never say that.
No.
That is not my duty.
No.
I think the Polar Music Prize people know what they're doing.
Okay. They do. Thank you, Patti.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.